Hello. Thank you so much for coming to this video today. I really appreciate it. This is my Cardano Aura podcast. I bring anybody on that is bringing value to the Cardano ecosystem, and lately it's been people building protocols, with Alonzo's about to roll out. So I really had a good time with this podcast. It was with DC from Liquid Finance, and he always teaches me so much about liquidity pools and DeFi and where the space is going in general. I think you'll really enjoy this one, so make sure you stay till the end. There's some good juicy bits in there. There may be some stuff that you already know, but I had to keep it, for people that are new and both for people that, have been here for a little bit, but there's stuff in there for everyone. If you guys want to support this channel, the easiest way you can do that is just by liking this video, commenting down below, and subscribing if you haven't already. There's also a notification bell so you don't miss any of these podcasts. I'm going to be uploading one of these every single Wednesday with maybe an extra one here and there in between. Also, if you want to support the channel, you can stake to my Stakepool Bloom. We have Bloom through Bloom 6. Bloom actually minted the 8th ever block on top of the Cardano blockchain. So we've been here from the beginning. We'll be here till your end. I've also been working on a gallery. It's called MycelialGallery. And we're actually going to be giving away a real-life print of Ada Lovelace. And this print was actually designed by an artist that's the co-founder of the gallery. His name's Project. But all you have to do is you have to go down below to the first link. You want to retweet that, you want to like it, and then you want to follow the MycelialGallery account. And here is, the image of that, and you guys will actually get that real-life print delivered to your door if you win that giveaway. We're going to be doing one of these every single day, every single weekday. We're going to be giving away a new print. We're going to be releasing all of the new characters in our gallery. So if you guys are interested in that, feel free to do that, but we're going to go ahead and jump into the podcast. Hello. Thank you guys for clicking on this podcast today. Today I have DC from Liquid Finance, and I'm really excited to have him on again. We did a podcast 5 months ago, but in Cardano time, it seems like forever. And last time that he was on, he provided me a lot of insights on liquidity pools and DeFi on Cardano in ways that, I couldn't have found those insights on my own. So I'm very excited to have him on again today.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Big Pay. Appreciate it. It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's no problem. In those 5 months, I want to say our users has probably doubled or tripled. So a lot of the people, watching this may not have seen the first interview and, may not really understand, DeFi or how it works or how to even interact with it. So, what is Liquid Finance and what are you guys doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So Liqwid is a decentralized money market protocol being built on Cardano's Plutus extended UTXO framework. So by a liquidity protocol, we're allowing borrowers and essentially savers and lenders to meet and trade interest rate curves essentially. So if I'm a supplier and I want to earn some yield on my otherwise, idle assets, whether it's a stable coin, whether it's ADA or some other token, I can use the Liqwid platform to essentially tokenize my balance, mint a token that represents that balance plus the interest that it's accruing, and allow my tokens that I've supplied to be borrowed by other users who are also collateralizing a position and then borrowing tokens from the protocol. So the yield that I earn as a supplier is driven from how much borrower interest is repaid in that market that I've supplied to.
Okay, so what does that look like from, the user perspective? And, is this something that a lot of users are going to participate in, or really people that, understand complex things that, want to earn this? Or is this something general that everyone can participate in?
Yeah, it's a great question. I want it to be as general and as straightforward a process as possible. We get questions a lot of how does your, documentation, how is that going to work? What's the actual workflow as a user for connecting my wallet to this DApp? This should be as simple a process as staking, except you're using an actual DeFi protocol, a liquidity pool in this case, to actually supply your assets to your wallet instead of delegate them to a staking pool. But the actual 1, 2, 3 process step for the end user should be very familiar and similar to the staking process. Essentially, you have some assets in your wallet, whether it's a Cardano native asset like ADA or whether it's some other native asset that gets minted on the blockchain. Let's take a stablecoin or AGIX, for example. You want to earn yield on those tokens instead of just having them, sit in your wallets. Basically, you connect your wallet to that specific market in Liquid, AGIX, the stablecoin, whatever other market you have tokens for that you'd like to, earn yield on them. You deposit those tokens into that market, and in doing so, that same transaction, you mint another token in our system. They're yield tokens, right? They're the equivalent of going to a DEX, providing liquidity and minting their LP tokens. In Liquid, we call those Q tokens. Users can then hold those tokens in their wallets, and they're automatically earning yield every single block as borrower interest is accruing to the protocol. The actual exchange rate between their Q tokens and the underlying asset that they've supplied is always increasing. And that's representative of the time value of money, essentially. And that can, increase at a faster slope or a lower slope, depending on how much borrower interest is actually being repaid in that market. And that's essentially how users can continuously and constantly earn interest on their, supplied balance, essentially.
Yeah.
Now, users on this side,
quick,
go ahead, please.
Let's break that down. So
Sure.
An average user, they're going to log into your website, and the average user knows how to stake, and they do that through your ROI. But
Right.
they're going to go to liquid.finance, and that's your website. And then from there, you're going to be able to connect your wallet. And if you've used, Ethereum before, it's going to be MetaMask style, where it's in the bottom right-hand corner. It's going to come down, and then you're going to be able to essentially pick a pool, right?
Correct. Yeah,
and then,
exactly.
And then once you pick the pool, it's going to give you a little notification to interact with the ROI or whatever wallet. Because I think, there's going to be multiple wallets in the future that are using the MetaMask style. So whatever wallet you're using, and then you're going to connect your ledger. You're going to say, yes, I approve this smart contract. And then you're going to provide, your ADA or your AGIX or whatever it may be to this liquidity pool. And it's important for Cardano users to know the difference, because on Ethereum, people say staking, right? But on Cardano, when you provide liquidity, you are giving up, your ADA to this smart contract, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, your ADA or your other Cardano native asset or token is leaving your wallet and entering that liquidity pool. I think what they mean in Ethereum DeFi when they say that staking, they mean those LP tokens that you mint. So in our case, Q tokens, but if this was a swap, it would be those LP tokens when you provide liquidity. You can stake those sometimes in a DeFi protocol and earn the governance token that way, actually. And Liqwid has a kind of similar mechanism for how we plan on distributing the LQ and how that function works. But I think that's the concept. But again, you're right. It's a different connotation of staking, because even then, it's not staking like in Cardano where you maintain full control of your ADA and it's still sitting in your wallet, but you're just delegating. This is truly like a staking contract that gets deployed to the blockchain that you send your LP tokens to. They're held in that contract, and every range, every epoch or amount of days, essentially you earn those governance tokens from that protocol. So that's kind of how they mean staking in ETH DeFi.
Okay, so then after you provide your ADA or whatever tokens you're providing to these pools, you're given a Q token in return, and that Q token is just a token representation of the liquidity that you've provided to the pool, and then that's what's paid interest. And is that interest paid in the currency that you provided to the pool, or is that interest paid in those Q tokens that you're getting from providing to the pool in the first place?
Right. So actually, it's in the underlying asset, right? And how this works, there's an exchange rate between the Q token and the underlying asset. At the initiation of a market, that exchange rate starts at, let's say, 0.2 or 0.1. It's an arbitrary number. But what happens as time goes on and as borrower interest is repaid, the exchange rate is constantly increasing. So the user who actually mints Q tokens isn't ever getting more Q tokens. It's simply the exchange rate between the time they minted and time T+1 or T+n into the future. They come back and the exchange rate has increased so much compared to the underlying that they can now redeem more of the underlying than what they initially supplied. So in that way, you're actually earning more of the underlying asset by just holding your Q tokens and having borrower interest be repaid in that market over time. So obviously, yes, it's a function of time here. So the longer you hold those Q tokens, the more interest that you will accrue and compound essentially to your underlying asset. So when you come back at time T+n in the future, you've received much more rewards than if you did just like a single epoch later, for example. And by rewards, I mean interest repaid to that market.
That's interesting. So, the value of these Q tokens appreciate the longer that you have that in there. Where is that value held? Is that value held in the smart contract?
Yes.
It is?
Yes.
So then
So there's a Q token smart contract for each market. It controls every single end user function. So when I mint, when I come back to redeem, when I borrow an asset, when I repay the borrower, or when I liquidate, when I do any of those kind of key 5 user functions in the system, it's all controlled by this Q token smart contract. There's a validator scripts. There's a controller script that just serves as kind of like a simulation layer on top of that Q token smart contract. But yes, that is essentially where the exchange rate is increasing and the amounts being repaid are kind of held in the system. Essentially, that's where all the back end accounting for each of the different Q token markets is being done. It's within the actual contract.
Okay, that's
And
very
that's all
interesting.
on-chain code. Yeah.
Yeah, and that makes a lot more sense to me now. And you answered this a little bit, but what is QADA? Is that what
Yes.
you get in return for providing ADA to the? Okay. So I saw
Correct.
you mention
So
that on your
yes.
Twitter.
Yeah, so Q tokens is just like the general name. If we were in Aave, it would be called A tokens. In Yearn, they call them Y tokens. Essentially, all they are is they're liquidity provider tokens, right? They're, in this case, yield tokens, but they're saying, okay, user has provided token X, and because they've done so, we're going to mint one for one the amount that they provided in terms of what's the current value of these Q tokens. That user now holds these, and as the borrower interest is repaid, the actual exchange rate for that Q token is constantly going up. So the actual price of that Q token is increasing compared to the underlying asset over time. But yeah, that's QADA is just the name for the ADA market. It would be QAGIX for that one, and so forth.
Yeah. So what are the risks that come with providing liquidity to these pools?
Yeah, there's a few risks. I think the main one for a supplier is simply a liquidity crunch event happening. In terms of the utilization of each of these markets. So the way this all works is these systems are based on supply and demand and an algorithm that is adjusting each block, the actual supply rate that gets paid out to the lenders and the borrower rate that's accruing for each borrower based on how much supply exists in that market compared to how much borrower demand is currently existing. And those two functions, those two kind of variables come together to make what we call market utilization. So as your market utilization gets closer to 100, that essentially means all of the supplied capital in that market is being borrowed. So your demand is massive. Your interest rates are very high at that point. You're basically on the far right side of the interest rate curve. Where you'd want to be is somewhere kind of in the middle, where you have sufficient supply, you have borrower demand, but you're not peaking up to the kind of top right side of your utilization curve, meaning that you have enough liquidity for your suppliers to actually exit the market. What you see right now in Aave and some of these other lending protocols, sometimes they have so much borrowing demand in their system that there's not enough liquidity for the suppliers who have minted in their system A tokens to actually redeem their underlying asset when they're ready to leave the market, right? And they've collected their interest, they've been there for some time. And that's an issue because so much borrowing outstanding loans exist that either haven't been repaid or are accruing interest, by the block, but are still outstanding. That's depending on how much of, a DAI, for example, that you want to take out of the market, there may not even be enough liquidity on the supply side to do that. And we have a couple, mitigations to that type of risk. There's a reserve factor that we have in each of these markets. So essentially, a part of the borrower interest that gets repaid is held by that same Q token smart contract, and essentially only held on the supply side. So these tokens cannot be borrowed at all. And there are Q tokens that are only held on the supply side for this same exact situation where lenders come along, they want to redeem their underlying asset. Now we have some liquidity buffer that we've built up as a result of this market reserve that they can use to quickly exit the market when they need to. And in those cases when demand might be peaking up close to that, top 80%. There's also a kink point in our basically our market formula and our interest rate curve kind of function. The way it operates is at 80% utilization of the market, a different slope kicks into the actual formula so that instead of a very steady kind of smooth slope, what happens at 80% utilization, because at this point we need to really incentivize repayment of loans as well as new supply to enter that market because we're pushing up on close to 100% utilization, the actual slope gets very vertical and actually starts to increase pretty aggressively to incentivize those users who have outstanding loans to repay and for new supply to come along because the interest rate that you're earning is so much higher now. You're incentivizing new users to supply to that market. So that's in a nutshell kind of how we mitigate the liquidity risk that exists. But it's definitely a very real one. It's definitely one that users need to be fully understanding of the kind of models that each of these different pools and the dynamics that are functioning behind them, because these things are kind of changing on the fly, and each block these things can change.
So the
So we
interest
really need
rates
to
for the
build up.
borrowers change as well?
Yes, both
Okay.
rates are floating rates, and it's the algorithm, it's the interest rate formula that's deciding based on the outstanding supply in each block and the outstanding loans in each block, what the set borrow rate and the set supply rate should be for the next block, essentially.
Yeah, that makes sense
There's
though, to
also,
have a linear curve, up into an
right,
exponential curve to, stop them from.
right.
Mhm.
Exactly. And that utilization is at 80%. That's a configurable number that can change through governance, but we feel that setting it around the 80% figure gives us enough of a cushion before you get to that fully maxed out 100% utilization to incentivize all of the users in that market to either resupply, repay a loan, etc. There's also default risks, when a user's outstanding borrower amount is underneath their collateral factor defined amount. So if I'm supplying to ADA, for example, and there's a 75% collateral factor, that means for every $100 I supply to the ADA market, I can borrow another token up to $75. Once my loan in that other token goes above $75, I've essentially exceeded my borrow limit, which is defined by that ADA collateral factor based on the 100 I supplied. So now a portion of my loan can be liquidated because I have a bad loan in the system, and that's bad debt for everyone who's supplied to that market, whatever asset I borrowed, right? And the way the system works is actually it's kind of a pooled automated liquidation strategy. It essentially works to collect all of these outstanding loans that are now bad or unhealthy in the system, meaning their borrow limit has gone above their defined collateral factor, borrow amount. And as soon as that happens, the portion that's over their borrow limit can now be liquidated in the system. And someone can come along, repay that, the borrowed asset that was actually taken by that user, repay that loan, close out that part of their bad debt, essentially. The suppliers in that market are now made whole again. And that user who comes along and does that, we call them the liquidator. They seize that borrower user's collateral at a discount, part of it, representative of the amount that they repaid. So essentially, we're building a UI right now for the actual application that's going to function similar to what we're calling internally a liquidation DEX, but we're calling to end users, and our documentation will call it the liquidation pool. Essentially, I come along with some token that's been borrowed and defaulted on. I'm helping the protocol basically mitigate its default risk now by repaying part of that loan. And in doing so, I'm receiving the amount that I repaid at a 10% discount, swapping it essentially against what that user sees collateral was. So yeah, it's a trading strategy for really good arbitrageurs or traders who want to basically earn this. All you have to do is really connect your wallet. You don't even have to be using Liqwid as a borrower or lender. If you just have one of the assets that's been defaulted on, you can just use this UI in the app to basically select how much of the liquidatable amount you want to repay, and then the UI will show you beneath how much you'll earn in terms of the seized collateral. You can click swap, kind of similar to a Uniswap, UI and feel, and then be able to kind of use the liquidation DEX as a method to just always earn 10% of a trading strategy, especially if you're a trader or arbitrager who holds a lot of some tokens and you want to kind of slowly unload them. This is a nice way to kind of do that and kind of compound and earn, a premium for doing that and securing the system. So yeah, that's how we're securing default risk. The other one I think though that's major is protocol security risk, right? That's just saying how secure are your smart contracts, how secure is the setup and the system within it, the actual structure and the data structure that's defining the interest rate model, how robust and secure are these things essentially, in volatile moments, in normal moments, how do these things function, how simulated are they? This is why we hired, Tweed. This is why we're working so closely with them. I was on a call yesterday with Manuel Chakravarti, and just some of the insights he's giving us in terms of, certain things we need to test for internally on when you have, a validator script, making sure that it tests for only the specific outputs. Tweed is the company. They're a Haspa software development firm. Manuel Chakravarti is a lead engineer at Tweed. He's worked with the Plutus and IOHK team for a while. I think he's, attributed with being the lead architect of the Plutus platform. So he's had massive contributions to, smart contracts on Cardano. And how this model is being implemented today, essentially.
Yeah, that's
And
definitely
yeah,
the guy to
just
ask, you know.
certainly. We're also working with Welltight. We're doing continuous advisory and code review sessions with them, and working specifically with Duncan Coots and asking him a ton of questions around, Plutus and staking and how our, state manager prototype concept needs to work for scaling our UTXO instances, like all these things that are kind of allowing us to operate at scale in production on day one. We're trying to reach out to the most, talented lead engineers and kind of high level devs at Cardano, working on this project specifically with Plutus to kind of tap into. And yeah, Manuel Chakravarti and Duncan Coots are up there with the best. So yeah, we're very lucky and grateful to kind of have them to be able to plug into and ask questions.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was curious about, you're going to have all of this ADA in these pools, and I was watching someone that actually helped develop Plutus as well, and they said that in Plutus you're going to have the ability to delegate the ADA in a smart contract to pools. So I was curious on how, what you guys are going to do about that, right? Because you're building a decentralized protocol, right? And it would be kind of centralized to have, LQ pools because there's a centralized source running those pools. So how are you guys, you have to obviously delegate the ADA to get at least that minimum 5%, to give more for people that provide liquidity. So I'm curious on,
Right.
what you guys think about that.
Yeah. So just right off the bat, we have no interest in running staking pools or anything like that. That's, for you, Big Pay, and the rest of the awesome Cardano stake pool operator community. And, our CTO Holger runs a small staking pool. So we know the process. We fully understand what it's like to run the Cardano node, but that's not what Liqwid and liquidity pools for us are all about. Because we already have that infrastructure built out with all the awesome stake pool operators who run single and, some who run many and have a full business kind of running pools. So yeah, that's just to set the stage. We do not plan on now or even in the future having to ever do that in our modular system. But
Yeah,
the
and
way
I
it will
wasn't
work
saying there
is
was anything negative or positive about that. I was just curious because
yeah,
you're really tackling this, with the fair token offering. It just seems
right.
like every step of the way that you're tackling this from a decentralized, protocol standpoint. So
Yeah, absolutely. Community led is what's key to us and is essentially why we haven't even, moved the tokens since they've been minted. Essentially, we're committed to only actually allowing the distribution event to begin once we have a product out there, once we have mainnet users all able to provide liquidity at the same time. But to answer your question directly, we're looking into basically allowing pointer addresses in Cardano and Plutus may allow users who enter into Liqwid with a connected wallet already staked to some community pool to essentially, and we talked about this in the last podcast, right? Sign a transaction body that would allow them essentially to continue staking with the community pool that they're in, even though they've actually sent their ADA to our QADA smart contract. The way the pointer address scheme may work is the address where the rewards that smart contracts is going to delegate the ADA to, that reward address could be that of the users who entered the market initially, right? In that given, whatever the community pool they came in with was. So that would be kind of the real hope and desire. We've talked about this extensively.
that's really
with the
interesting.
devs. We have one dev who's focused only on just doing, some research and looking into this, Plutus and staking and the full control we have right now. Yeah, it's definitely something that's very key to have in our system. It makes using our system and being like a Cardano power user much simpler because it automates the process. Like you said, you want to be able to capture that base staking rate and then have the yields from a lending protocol like Liqwid built on top of that. We're definitely keen on getting that in. It's crucial for Liqwid, and for Liqwid USD, it's also very critical to have this type of feature, especially since ADA will be the only collateral type
Well, and
in that system.
it's crucial for Cardano,
Yeah,
because if you think about it, we're progressing towards this
absolutely.
smart contract age, so by
Right.
your team, kind of being the team that stands up and says, we're not going to delegate these smart contracts to our own pools. We're going to have someone design a method that whoever is providing ADA to our smart contract, we're just going to delegate to the pool that they're already in that holds the decentralization of Cardano, even though people are participating in decentralized smart contracts.
Yep, that's 100% the plan, and the kind of strategy that we're moving forward with. If anything, I think it would be a set of community stake pools that we allow the LQ token holders to kind of vote on and decide and select. So, we choose maybe, the top 50 stake pools by performance, and maybe we include some threshold of, okay, these are, charity pools who actually, provide some amounts of their ADA profits to nonprofit organizations or things like that, or whatever we define that like selection criteria to be. We could use that to select, 50 to 100 of the best that we decide is the best, right? Stake pool operators, and delegate to only those pools. But whatever way we decide to do that, I promise it will be a community-led, decentralized process, and it won't be one where Liqwid is ever, spinning up 10 stake pools or something crazy like that to try to run it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting, to see someone, integrate like the real world business aspect with building a decentralized protocol. Like it's hard, man, and I commend you for that. So I was curious about, you mentioned oracles before we started talking. Oracles are key to this, right? Can you explain to me, how you guys are, building your own oracles? Because, Hydra, I thought was, kind of Cardano's data input. So how are people going to build these protocols without kind of like an on-chain, data input?
Yeah, it's a great question. Right now, we're going through that whole process right now. Our devs are spending pretty much every day for the last couple of weeks just exploring the Oracle process and working with how you can build an on-chain Oracle script that actually takes in data from an API like a Coinbase or a Binance or a Kraken exchange for taking the price of ADA every few minutes that they sign with their public key and are able to kind of basically push that price into our on-chain contract using kind of the API connection that we build actually into the Oracle script. Definitely not simple process. There's a lot of different parts of Plutus contracts that you need to get right to be able to do something like this. We have a prototype and kind of the first version of this, working. We're internally collecting a lot of feedback on this process and, getting the price Oracle to a point where it is actually something that we can push into master and have an audit and, have security testers come in and take a hard look at. But yeah, right now we're figuring out some things with the datum and how that kind of value can work and be updated with regards to the actual price feed that's going to be pushed from these, APIs. But essentially, it's a Plutus contract, a piece of on-chain code. And this script is essentially looking for every time that public key, and we know the public key because it will be the specific, key that Binance or Coinbase or CoinGecko or one of these other kind of exchanges or price feed aggregators uses. The contract is saying every time this market's updated with this, take the average across all of the different API price feeds that were given, and then use that that kind of average to kind of update the Oracle price for that specific market. There's also concepts like time-weighted average price. You can do that to basically offset if price moves a certain percent up or down, and it's an arbitrary defined number, but let's say 1%. You can fall back on, say, the price from a DEX or, maybe the price from 30 minutes or an hour ago, to ensure that your market is not being manipulated, that you're not getting a manipulated Oracle price, and that the system is secure from that way. So you see that a lot. There's also kind of volume weighted average price. So you can say, okay, the Binance ADA market is, 3x larger than the Coinbase ADA market. So the Binance price feed should have 3x the weight of the Coinbase one. Things like that are kind of what we're considering building into the function for how we're taking and kind of aggregating the price from all these different off-chain APIs, essentially on-chain. We're in the early kind of to mid stages of building out that Oracle contract. Like I said, we have the first part of it working. The last part of it is kind of like the more tricky part, and getting all these pieces to connect and update and work with the existing set of contracts the right way. And if you can imagine, like the Oracle system is kind of like the bedrock and really kind of connects to a lot of what we're doing in terms of Liqwid, and determines not only the borrow amount, but when a position can be liquidated, the total collateral value at any given time for a user's account. So all of these things that are really determinant upon always having a robust kind of updated Oracle model. That's basically what we're spending the last few weeks on, and we'll continue the next couple of weeks to to really build out and get right. But I'm very optimistic that our devs will get it right, and we'll have something very secure and robust entering that audit in late July, early August timeframe.
Yeah. So when Hydra comes out, is that going to benefit your team, or are you just kind of going to throw out all of these APIs that you've been writing to make this work now when Hydra comes?
No, Hydra's huge. I mean, Hydra is a scaling solution. Hydra is saying, hey, we have layer 2 scaling, and it's isomorphic. So your smart contracts that you've built on, layer 1 Plutus can just run in a Hydra node essentially, or, a Hydra, layer 2 kind of setup. And basically it's for your end user, your costs are going to be scaling, significantly cheaper and lower because you're batching a bunch of transactions. It's not ledger-based sharding, but it's definitely a version of layer 2 sharding. So yeah, Hydra as a system to basically scale all of the contracts in Plutus and Cardano, that's going to be huge. And honestly, there might be Wolfram Alpha might come out and just be a fantastic mechanism for oracles. Indigo, the synthetic assets protocol and team that I'm working with, it has a call set up with Wolfram in the coming weeks to talk about just how we're sourcing our prices and maybe some services that they can provide for that protocol. It's just a matter of what are the timelines for implementing these things, and is this something that we want to just build ourselves or rely on IOHK or some other third-party service and infrastructure to kind of get right for us. In the case of oracles for Liqwid, this is something that we feel we have the resources, the bandwidth internally to just build out ourselves. So we're just taking that route. But yeah, this is by no means the end all be all. If another more robust, secure, and lower cost mechanism to do oracles comes along, we'll look to pivot as quickly as possible for that. And the way we're actually implementing the system, it's upgradable, right? It's all of these contracts that we have are upgradable through the DAO governance control mechanism, meaning that if we need to upgrade the Oracle contract or even the method for doing oracles or any other parameter in a smart contract or the entire contract itself, there's a process to kind of quickly do that through the governance kind of pattern that we have.
You mentioned on-chain and off-chain Plutus smart contracts. Can you tell us why you would need an off-chain Plutus smart contract and then on-chain, kind of the benefits of both?
Yeah, absolutely. So the easiest way to think of it is a single Plutus contract has part of its code that runs off-chain and part of its code that actually executes on the blockchain itself. But the majority of that code, even in Ethereum DeFi protocols and Solidity contract code, most of it is off-chain code, to be real. The part of the code that's on-chain that you actually pay computation costs to execute and to kind of simulate on the blockchain, that is the most critical smart contract logic. That's the piece that every single person or user needs to be able to verify before even using that contract for your DeFi or DApp protocol to be deemed just censorship resistant and just a really kind of fair, transparent system, right? That's the critical logic of the service that your app is providing, essentially.
So what is that critical logic?
It could be in a DeFi protocol, settlement, escrow. It could be, custody, like it is for Liqwid when you're actually giving the smart contract custody of your ADA to then lend out to another user who's collateralized. It depends on what the actual protocol is doing, right? In Uniswap, I would say the service is, just providing the guarantee that you're going to get the same swap rate as every other user in the system. So that kind of key piece that the app is actually providing as its core service, the function behind that needs to validate on chain. Everything else that kind of gets you towards that piece can be written in off-chain code. And the way Plutus is actually architected is to drive most of the contract code to be written in the off-chain. And only the actual key pieces of on-chain code and the actual kind of core components of your logic need to be written in on-chain Plutus code. And I was just having a call with our, technical lead dev right before we hopped on, and he mentioned that only, 75% or more of our code base is off-chain Plutus code right now. So
then how is it ran, right? So we have this off-chain code, who is computing that, and how does it interact with the code that's on chain, in a decentralized manner?
So, I mean, part of this is
Sorry,
all
man.
just
A lot of
being
this stuff is
compiled.
new to me, and it's so interesting.
You're good. It's also compiling down to Plutus core. Like at the end of the day, like there's a piece of code that you're building to run in the off chain and then kind of the user's application interface, and they're connecting their wallet, and there's some user actions that are happening with the off chain bit of code. But once they actually push an action in a transaction, that's going to trigger some event like minting a Q token or redeeming or borrowing. That's when they're actually interacting with the actual on-chain part of the Q token contract. So that's all on-chain parts of the code. We were querying actually before this the total lines of code that we have for our code base. It's probably pretty large at this point, only going to grow in the coming months. But at the end of the day, all of the code off and on-chain is still compiling all down to the same place, which is Plutus core. It's essentially just saying you don't need to actually have all of the code and the cost of computation and expense and time to try to compile your entire application's like source code essentially on chain would be ridiculous and like kind of way too complex to actually do. And what gets you decentralization and censorship resistance isn't even doing that. It's actually only having the key pieces that users must be able to validate and verify being the on-chain code. So yeah, that's kind of my high level non-developer kind of financial analyst background understanding of how the on-chain and off-chain code piece of this works. But yeah, 75% plus of our code base is off-chain.
No, that was really helpful. And, I'm not really a developer either, but you made it make sense for me. So I appreciate that. And I would like to see it, in working, just like a very basic model of, a little bit of on-chain, a little bit of off-chain, just like look at the code myself to actually understand it. I was curious about, what insights you can give people that, don't have Alonzo Blue nodes up on, what that process looks like on the inside. Because, a year ago I was in the friends and family testnet, and there was just this nice energy in the air where we were all so excited. We had to get new nodes up all the time. They were constant. It was just like every week there'd be a new update. There'd be like, it was just constant. So I'm curious on, your developers kind of story and what insights you've derived from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, just to follow up, I'm reading the developers' messages in Slack right now. Most of the on-chain code is actually in the validator script itself. So yeah, it's staggering how much of the actual Plutus code is just written in in the off-chain kind of code environment. But yeah, that's really interesting to see. And the validator script is something that is kind of like the risk simulator that Manuel Chakravarty was mentioning, like to check that all of the outputs in your contract are actually the correct and defined and only the specific outputs that contract should be able to produce. It's your validator script that kind of checks that and ensures before that contract executes that those things are kind of sorted and that data structure is correct. But yeah, so running Alonzo Blue nodes, that's been great. Our CTO Holger, who also runs Cardano 24 Stakepool, he's been involved in the running of Alonzo Blue. Shout out to Andrew Westberg. He's an amazing Stakepool operator, runs Blue Cheese Steakhouse, and he actually brought Holger in as his +1 to be able to kind of get comfortable and used to running the Alonzo Blue nodes and any system upgrades or tweaks that need to be had. Holger has kind of had some time to kind of get up to speed and doing that. But yeah, the right now kind of version of it feels very similar, like you just mentioned, to the early days of the ITN. You have a small group of Stakepool operators, you have a small group of Plutus partners and pioneers who are working very closely with the actual Plutus delivery team and running an early version of the node and software. The functionality will scale and increase rapidly. We already see the 2.0 version of Alonzo Blue. And right now we're at a point where pretty soon we'll be able to deploy like all of the contracts that we already have completed to date onto semi-public version of the testnet, whether that's in the Alonzo white or the next color scheme after that. It seems like we're heading there pretty quickly since we already have upgraded to the 2.0 version of Alonzo Blue. But yeah, our dev is running it. M Labs is in the Plutus Partners program, so they're working on other DeFi related use cases and things with the Plutus team, and they're going to look to deploy those prototype dApps that they've worked on with these other Haskell firms, as quickly as they can to the earliest version of the testnet that they get.
You guys breaking a lot?
Breaking a lot, asking a lot of questions. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same
it's
thing.
Good, though.
Same thing for me.
I hear you.
Who would you consider your biggest competitor that is building on Cardano?
That's a good question. Honestly, right now, it's crazy to say this, but like our biggest competitor might not even be public yet. Like there's teams that I have talked to and I've spoken with. There's guys that are coming out with like very sophisticated solutions on Cardano that are going to touch into traditional finance in a very tangible way. I don't want to give too much away on them or even give them any alpha, and I won't even say their name for now because I'm sure they'll come out public soon and you guys will all hear about them. But yeah, there's protocols that are very legit that are building, DeFi lending solutions for trading options and other derivatives on Cardano, solutions for foreign exchange markets, other stablecoin protocols. The competition across DeFi is definitely heating up in Cardano, and you can tell it's like a lot of these teams have either been sorting out their back-end kind of formulas and math for months now, and are now just coming public with kind of the work that they've done to date. And yeah, learning Plutus and Haskell for a seasoned Haskell dev, or even a seasoned dev who knows multiple languages is not like the heaviest lift in the world, especially with like awesome courses from Lars and all the developer content being put out there right now for Plutus. That kind of timeline, if you will, that learning curve is going to really start to get very much easier for a new dev to just step into Cardano and pick things up, as well as like the tools and the SDKs being built out for like JavaScript and Python and Rust devs. That should help lower the learning curve and barrier a lot for entry for new Cardano Plutus devs.
Yeah, and it's going to be easy too for teams just to pick up, a bunch of Plutus pioneers here in a couple of months as well.
100%. There's going to be a whole market around it. We were talking about this before the call, right? If Lars keeps crushing it and we get to like, over 10,000 Plutus pioneer devs trained up by him and co, like that's going to be a real like, force to be reckoned with in terms of having a developer moat. Everyone talks about Ethereum's developer moat. What happens when Cardano has, 10 to 20,000 devs who have just learned Plutus online really and are now building everything from DeFi protocols to NFT marketplaces, to decentralized storage solutions and more on the blockchain. Like that, to me, like that's quickly where we're heading. It's just fascinating to kind of watch it all take off.
Yeah, I agree. You have a lot of knowledge, on projects on Ethereum. That's what we spent really a good portion of our last podcast talking about. There's a lot of new projects coming out on Cardano, and for people that are really just interested in Cardano, we don't have insights on, how do we actually look at a project and see if that project is really going to provide value, if that project's really going to create something? Is there kind of like some red flags, maybe that you could go over for my users that if the project's doing this, then there's a high chance, that they're not going to build something, they're not going to come to market because, I get asked every day, hey, can you look into this project for me? And, I look into it, I give my thoughts and opinions, but I don't have a good history in the DeFi space to give people, a good opinion. So what are those red flags?
I mean, I think the main thing to really think about is that DeFi and these new protocols being built are just startups, right? I was reading an article from actually Mark Cuban, and he had a pretty sage take on kind of how valuing these different DeFi protocols should work and what that framework for like investors stepping in should look like. And you kind of ask a similar question here. I think it all comes down to like, who is the founder? What is the founding team? What is the core service that they want to provide? Like, how saturated is that market? Like if I see another team that's just saying they're going to build a Uniswap like DEX on Cardano, I'm like, well, okay, we already have like, 12 of those being built right now. Are they doing anything different? Is this just the same exact thing that we have now? If it's not, what are those differentiators? What's like the key value proposition that they want to provide and bring to the table compared to what everyone else has? Also, it's just like if they're building on another blockchain and then like going to like make their way, I feel like I hear this a lot, like bridge their way to Cardano. It's just like, let's maybe see you guys build and deploy on that blockchain first. Let's see it working in action there, not just like an IDO or a token sale on Uniswap. Like I'm saying, like truly deploy a product, written and built in, whether it's Rust, if you're deploying on, blockchains that support it, like, Solana or some of these other blockchains, if it's Solidity code on Ethereum, whatever it is, let's see that product, even if it's the Ergo Dex, right? Like, let's see the actual Dex go live on your main blockchain, and then let's see the actual bridge mechanism to Cardano. Because like building on Cardano and Plutus, and our Haskell devs will hop on anytime to kind of tell you, it is very different than building in any other programming language or blockchain.
So isn't that
it's
kind of counterintuitive different as well? You know, you say, oh, well, just let's see you build something on that chain first. Well, you know, there's a lot of advantages to Plutus, right? That they're going to be missing out building on that other blockchain in the first place.
There is, but these teams are already committed to that. Like you can't be like, you know, oh, you guys should scrap your other plans to build on other. It's like, okay, let's actually just see if they're saying they're gonna, you know, be a multi-chain solution and they're gonna deploy on chain X right now and then come to Cardano in the future. Okay, let's actually see them deploy on chain X to like get some notion of what their capability is to actually get something, you know, built and kind of production ready. That's what I mean. I obviously would encourage anyone to always take Plutus first as the option.
Yeah, so Plutus is at the top of the hierarchy, and it's like if you're going to build 100%. Something, at least have something built instead of just doing an IDO and collecting funds, you know.
Exactly, absolutely. And if you're going to do that IDO, collect fund, great, but like actually do that and like, you know, have a product that you put out there, you know, have a system that's functional on that blockchain. And there's projects and protocols that do that all the time, and they actually build really good products on Ethereum, and then they migrate them to Binance Smart Chain for the lower costs and fees or whatever have you, at the cost of decentralization maybe. But, you know, they do that and successfully deploy on both chains. And now you have, you know, a product that works across chains, or you're using Polygon or something else. That's great. That's fine. I'm just saying, like, why not, if you're a team that hasn't even deployed it yet on that first chain, why not just build it directly on Cardano at that point? Like, you'll save yourself so much time and heartache, and you'll build it right the first time, rather than like trying to build something in a different blockchain and then try to like do this really difficult, almost like translation into the Cardano extended UTXO model. It's just so different than trying to build in accounts-based Solidity or Rust that it doesn't even make sense.
That's already saturated as well. That's why it doesn't make sense to me. You know, the market's already saturated, so why build it on Ethereum and say you're going to build it on Cardano when you have this completely open market where but Plutus was just released, right? So you are having, you know, you're first to start essentially, right? So why try to build a different product on a different chain? And I like that you brought up, you know, that there's 12 different people building swap protocols, right? I have seen emails from, you know, swap protocols where they're selling their tokens at a $50,000 minimum, you know, and these people work accredited investors, but it's still like, is that, you're making a token out of thin air, you're selling it for $50,000, you know, to people that you're emailing. And I'm talking to these people and I'm saying, you know, there are 12 protocols that I know of that are all doing a similar thing, you know, so what are the odds of the protocol that you invest in actually succeeding? It's low. It's like the ICO days in the past, right? Cardano's going through a period where, you know, a lot of these projects will fail. And you mentioned also invest in the founder of the protocol. You know, of the 12 projects, there's some good ones, right?
Absolutely. 100%.
And that's what, I mean, Ben Gortzel, for example, you know, I trust that guy. I mean, he's gonna build a damn good protocol. So, you know, investing in a project that hasn't really done anything yet, they haven't written a white paper, just be careful, you know, who you choose to invest in. You know, there's no financial advice here, and just never invest more than you're willing to lose, because we're heading into some risky times, and, you know, people have made some good gains off of ADA, and, you know, they're looking for their next one, you know, and I think ADA is a gem that it's not often that you find something else, you know.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I definitely think there's DEX protocols. I see the MinSwap guys. I see the Damon Exchange guys. There's teams that I think are going to build some amazing products on Cardano, and already are building and, you know, almost ready to deploy to testnet. Not too different than Liqwid. You know, some will do really well, some won't do so well. But I think at the end of it all, like, and you kind of said this in the tweet the other day, Big Pay, it's like we're at this like watershed moment where the wave of like adoption for Cardano is going to be like really the products that are being built 6 months, you know, after Plutus is deployed on mainnet, right? So yeah, you deploy your V1 protocol and your contracts, but what are the upgrades? What are the things that you use the Plutus application framework to do? How do you integrate Atala Prism? What are, like, you know, the composable products that you build on top of your base system that really, you know, take your user growth and kind of adoption of your system to the next level? That's what I'm really looking forward to getting to. And I think that we're only a few months out. So it's just like, it's super fascinating and exciting.
Yeah. So there's two more things I wanted to talk about before we hop off here.
Yeah, man.
Fair token offering. What is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Fair token, and we kind of hit on this earlier, saying everyone in the system gets to provide liquidity and earn LQ at the same exact time, right? So there's no VC or early investor who steps in and gets to, purchase at a, tenth of the price that we set it to.
So you can't email people like that are accredited investors and sell for $50,000. Exactly.
No. Yeah. There's no token sale. There's no pre-sale happening. No ICO, IDO. This is saying we're going to release a series of contracts at V1 launch. One of them will allow you to take those Q tokens that you've minted in our system, stake them, deposit them, but we call it a staking contract, and earn LQ each epoch based on how much borrower interest is repaid in your market. Simple calculator will determine it all for you and show you kind of the rates that you're earning each epoch. And that's how the distribution function will work. And that's kind of what we mean by fair token launch. And when that liquidity event will kick off, it's at the launch of the system on Plutus mainnet.
Yeah. And what do you think of the newly released ISO model? SundaeSwap was the first to introduce it, but I think they kind of just let the genie out of the bottle with that. And I think we're going to see many funding models in the future that are ISO.
Yeah, I think it's actually really cool. I think it's interesting. We kind of committed to a route that I think is probably more similar to what you see Ethereum DeFi protocols do with like a yield farming launch, or you see a lot of Binance Smart Chain DeFi protocols do a similar type of approach. I think the ISO route has, some major implications, especially when combined with like Babel fees and some other things. Stakepool operators really enter the chat of like almost being mini VCs themselves. And if they can, essentially, in my opinion, you can have like, there's no real need for, a launch pad to exist if you have direct connection from DApp protocol founder to Stakepool operator who plans to kind of support them through the ISO model. The launch pad kind of gets taken out. They're like almost a third party middleman of necessity right now. But when this model goes live, if you have a real system that connects, the big pays and the Ubeds and the other kind of really competent and operating at scale Stakepool operators with the upcoming DeFi protocol founders who want to distribute their token, you just, as a service, you run ISO as a service. And now the users themselves who want to invest in these protocols can just, we call it ape in Ethereum DeFi, but you're just aping into staking with them. So you're just delegating your ADA and then you're earning the token. So it's a much, in my opinion, more favorable solution for the end user who wants to earn their governance token. I think it's
less risky as well.
It's less risky.
You're only
100%.
losing your rewards.
Exactly, 100%. So yeah, I think it'll take off. I think it's super cool. Not anything that we're planning for Liqwid at all. We get asked that almost every day now. When ISO, it's like that's not something that we're going to do at all. But really exciting to see that kind of take off, and I hope the MinSwap guys, build a standard around that. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Or the SundaeSwap guys. Sorry, SundaeSwap. My bad.
Yeah, I didn't know if they were doing it as well. I believe you.
Yeah.
So the last thing I want to talk about was, your governance. And one of the questions I have with that is, how do you get a new token added to, Liqwid?
Yeah, great question. So that's called market initiation in our system. And essentially it's through governance. A user can propose it. Any user who holds LQ, who holds over a certain defined threshold of LQ, either outright or delegated to them. So kind of the same way you delegate to, Bloompool, for example, that user can introduce a proposal to add a new token, whether that token is, Ergo, Sigma USD, AGIX, any token that's not already supported on Liqwid, but is a Cardano native asset. That user can introduce the proposal on chain to say, basically, there's a formal voting period to begin saying, yes, no, do we want to add this token into the list of supported markets? With that, though, the user has to select all the parameters, such as the collateral factor, the liquidation bonus, if there's going to be a hard cap on that, all the functions that you would select for a new market that you create. That user has to kind of include those, the actual interest rate model, what that's going to be, whether it's a stable coin or a crypto like ADA that differentiates it. Once that's happened and the votes occur, if the threshold is met. So I believe the threshold is, I want to say like 2% of total LQ actually meets the quorum and votes on that proposal. If over 50% of it votes yes, then the actual token is added as one of the supported tokens. And as soon as it's included, users can begin supplying it. Users can begin using, the Q tokens as collateral or borrow that asset. So that's kind of how that process works. And tokens can be delisted as well. So the same market initiation process, there's also a governance control process for token delisting as well. So it's all kind of controlled through the DAO, and the LQ token holders are the ones who propose these different ideas, whether it's just to change the parameter or whether it's to create a new market for a new token or to delist a current existing token. These are all kind of proposals that get introduced on chain and then voted on and then executed, all from the governing smart contract itself.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. How can someone participate in Liqwid? If they see this podcast and they're inspired by it, how do they participate? How do they stay up to date as well?
Yeah, great question. We're actually spinning up right now a forum, liquid.finance, and that'll just be for handling governance and kind of some of the issues that we talked about today, and just some of the proposals that will flow through the process of being a Liqwid LQ holder and user. That's really a great place to kind of get started for new users. And as soon as that goes live some point at the end of this week or early next at the latest, we'll definitely drop a link to that. So, new users can come and join and keep up with what's actually happening on the governance side. Right now, I would say following us on Twitter, joining our Discord, which is in our Twitter link bio, would be a great place to join the community, keep up with all the happenings and all the development updates. We post them there. We post actually our weekly status updates to Reddit, to the Cardano forum, as well as Twitter. So most users who are, in and around the Cardano space and are following us on Twitter and can join our Discord will certainly be able to, keep up with all our updates. And as soon as something new is out there, they'll be the first ones to know, because those are our official channels and we post all of our news there.
Okay. Yeah. And for people still wondering, how do I buy LQ? The only way you can get it is when the protocol actually launches in the August or September. Are you guys going to launch, because you can write the smart contracts now, right?
Yes. Yeah, so we can write the contracts now. It's just deploying them to like Plutus mainnet is something that is obviously dependent on Plutus being on mainnet and, having that hard fork event actually having take place already. But yeah, the moment after Plutus hard forks, we can essentially deploy our contracts.
Cool. Well, I really appreciate you coming on today, man. Is there anything else that you'd like to say?
No, this is great, Big Pay, man. Thanks for having me. We're just two Florida men now, just roaming around. Good to
two Florida men. Here, man. You're right,
yeah.
Man. Hopefully we can catch up in Miami next time, man.
Yeah, no, definitely. We certainly will.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning into this podcast. If you made it all the way till the end, make sure you comment Liqwid down below. If you do enjoy it, make sure you click that like button. If you're not subscribed, I'd appreciate it if you also click that subscribe button. We do these podcasts once a week. I usually post them on Wednesday. But again, thank you guys so much. I hope you have a good rest of your week.